Today, it is our pleasure and great opportunity to ask few questions His Excellency, Ambassador, Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Canada to Turkey, Mr. John T. Holmes.
Thank you.
And we will start with a little bit hitting question. Is it true that, as quoted by Mr. Mustafa Kemal, that peace at home is a precondition for peace at world?
I think so. I think he was, of course, a very visionary leader, creating the modern Turkey out of the remnants of the Ottoman Empire. And his philosophy was very much, as you indicated, as the quote indicates, the importance of building a strong, peaceful Turkey after so many years of conflict, and then allowing it to reach out globally. And I think that definitely is the case. I mean, it's hard to imagine a country that has an active conflict going on being able to move forward and lend its assistance, its principles to resolving other conflicts. It's not impossible, but I think it would be a challenge. So the strongest mediators, the strongest peace builders, I think, are those countries with solid institutions and a tradition of peace and dialogue.
Thank you very much.
How do you see conflict in Syria affecting Turkey, for example, especially in the sense of refugees?
Well, it's very worrisome what's going on. I think Foreign Minister Davutoglu is briefing NATO this week on the situation. We've not only got a growing refugee problem, over 25,000 refugees so far, but also, as happened a week or so ago, the potential for conflict crossing the border as Syrian authorities, we think, fired across the border and injured Turkish and Syrian nationals. So that's very worrisome. I think also we can't lose fact, the human cost is the most important. I don't want to belittle it, but there's also an economic cost. I mean, Turkish businesses in the south are suffering immensely. Not only was Syria an important trading partner, but it was the conduit to many other countries in the Middle East where Turkey was doing good business. So it has a political, a human, and an economic cost.
Connecting to this issue of Syria, would it be possible if Syrian armed forces would actually cross the border and endanger Turkish civilians at Turkish soil to invoke Article 5 of Atlantic Charter?
Well, I would say it's hard to imagine the Syrian authorities giving orders to do such a thing. There's the NATO issue for sure, but Turkey has its own very large, very, very capable armed forces and would no doubt respond accordingly. So the risk to the Syrian regime, I think, would be too great. But anytime you have a conflict such as we have right now, you're not exactly sure who is in charge. President Bashir Assad has given promises to various world leaders, including of late former Secretary General Annan, that the conflict will stop, that the troops will no longer fire. And yet we see daily, even today, people being killed in Syria. So are his own troops not listening to him? Is he not telling the truth when he makes these promises? These are all questions that need to be asked. But with respect to your question, if there are rogue elements that are doing their own thing, then the calculations change. It could be a local commander says, the heck with this, I'm tired of those people crossing the border and doing whatever they're doing. I'm going to go after people in this refugee camp or this camp, and then you have the risk of a real explosion of violence in the region.
What would be, for example, a role of cultural diplomacy in that sense?
Cultural diplomacy, I think, can play a number of roles. I see it mostly in terms of preventive diplomacy or conflict prevention. I think oftentimes where you have interstate conflict, it can happen as a result of lack of understanding, prejudices that have existed for many, many years. And if you don't have a situation where there is dialogue, where there is an understanding between different groups, different states, as to what are the problems, how do we dialogue to solve the problems, how can our people-to-people contacts work to prevent an escalation of a situation, then there are real risks of a violent conflict breaking out. Once you have a situation as we have in Syria, where there is an active conflict inside the state going on, I'm not saying cultural diplomacy can't and shouldn't be a factor, but you need a truce. Cultural diplomacy, it's very difficult for it to work in a conflict situation. I think if you take a broad definition of cultural diplomacy, though, in my statement, I talked about the importance of mediation. And I think understanding not only the political context, the economic context, but also the social context, the cultural context, is vital to eventually solving an issue, such as in Syria. So understanding what drives people on both sides of the issue, or multiple sides of the issue, is very important for anyone playing a mediation role.
Thank you.
Now we would like to switch to another issue, and it's the possible Turkish EU membership. Do you think that greater progress in the integration process would help Turkey to cement democracy, or maybe just clear European perspective, as promise from the EU that after fulfilling all the conditions and obligations, Turkey will really have possibility to become a member, and it's missing right now?
You flagged two issues. I'm going to comment on two issues. You've maybe flagged more than two. I'm going to comment on two. One is that since the dialogue process has started, there has been tremendous progress in Turkey. I think from a Canadian perspective, we see over the last decade, tremendous progress in democracy, good governance, human rights in this country, and we see Turkey very much as a strategic partner for Canada. So, and I think that the EU process has helped, not only politically, but also technically. The amount of work that EU and Turkish colleagues have done on the nuts and bolts of good governance has been impressive. And I think both sides are to be congratulated on that. Canada is on record as supporting Turkey's eventual membership into the EU, but this is a decision for EU and for Turkey. It's not a decision for outsiders. We lend our political and moral support. We think it would be in the interest of all. We are a free trade country. We live on trade, as does Turkey, as do many European countries. And so anything that would lead to greater, transparent trade relationships, we see as an advantage. And we are currently negotiating a free trade agreement with the EU. We would love to, first of all, have that, and second of all, have Turkey part of that. We see great potential in the Turkish market, and vice versa. We see great opportunities for Turkish businesses to invest in Canada, which we would welcome.
Yes, I think it's quite possible because Turkey and EU have customs union between them, so then access to Turkish market wouldn't be that big challenge for Canada.
We hope so. Well, we hope it happens.
Yes.
We're very keen
The
to
great challenge
talk.
will be you.
Yes.
Actually now during the crisis and all this stuff.
True.
What about, for example, Turkey's involvement in international legal system?
Well, I'm a little less familiar with their involvement legally. I think the other aspect that we strongly support is Turkey's growing importance regionally and globally. And again, as a NATO partner, as a country that with which we share many values and many interests, we welcome Turkey's growing role regionally, certainly in the Middle East. We have worked closely with Turkey in the situation in Libya, and we welcome the very positive statements made by Turkish leaders on going back to the early days of the Arab Spring, where they called for democracy, respect for human rights, a new beginning in many of the Arab countries, as well as their leadership on the Syria situation, one of the founders of the Friends of Syria, and just recently co-hosted the latest meeting of the Friends in Syria a couple of weeks ago. So Turkish leadership on these issues we value and encourage.
Thank you.
And also connected to the international law, I would like to ask, what should be the future role of the International Criminal Court? Because if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that probably right now the ad hoc tribunals could be more successful.
Well, I think the days of the ad hoc tribunals are going to be over. I cannot see the United Nations agreeing to set up a new international ad hoc tribunal when the capacity exists for the ICC to take it on. I know that when we were talking about the possible indictment of Sudan, and again with Libya, there were some countries who argued, no, we don't want the ICC, we don't like the ICC, we want an international tribunal. And the rest of the UN membership said no. The ICC was set up with a view to having the Security Council refer specific situations for it. We're not going to create a new expensive body just for that. Where there is still scope for some activity is what they call a hybrid tribunal. That was the situation in Lebanon. It wasn't so much that people were opposed to the ICC, but it was more a situation where Lebanon said, the crime that we want to investigate took place on Lebanese soil. It was part of a political dynamic in Lebanon. We have a good judicial system. We want to be involved. But we recognize we need, for international acceptance and national acceptance, we need international players to be involved. So they've created this hybrid where the prosecutor is international, happens to be Canadian, but the judges, or most of the judges, are actually going to be Lebanese. So there is scope for that, where a country has a functioning and impartial legal system, but where they do need international help. But in other situations, I think the ICC is very much capable. There were a lot of slow processes. It's been criticized for taking so long to indict people and to prosecute people. It is expensive, there is no doubt about it. But I think now we will see an accelerating process where, as they get their rules and regulations in place, they know how to deal with defendants who are disruptive to the process, and at the same time remaining fair and impartial. I think you will see the ICC playing a greater role in international justice.
Yes, actually, it's changing all the time in this way.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, Your Excellency, we would like to express our gratitude to you that you spent this time with us, gave us these comprehensive and substantial answers, and we would like to wish you all the best in your great and future career, and maybe you would like to continue the cooperation in the future.
Well, thank you. Thank you for very good questions, and I'm delighted to be here, and keep up the good work with your institute.
Thank you.